Good evening, night creatures. Tonight, listen to the history of Apollo's twin sister, Artemis, goddess of the hunt. Close your eyes. Let your body become still as a deer in moonlight, as quiet as a forest at dusk, as peaceful as silver light reflecting on a still lake. Feel the cool night air touching your skin. Gentle, eternal, wild. We are beginning a journey back through time to the age of gods, when the moon was a goddess racing across the sky, when the hunt was sacred, when wild places belonged to the divine, when independence was not just chosen, but demanded. Fiercely, absolutely, forever. Let your breathing slow, deep, effortless, like the rhythm of the moon's phases, like the padding of silent paws through forest, like the flight of arrows through clear night air, like the heartbeat of the wild itself. Part 1. Birth on Delos and the choice of eternal freedom. Settle deeper into perfect stillness. Release every muscle, every tension, every care. Let your forehead smooth like water at dawn, your jaw soften like wax in gentle warmth, your shoulders fall like leaves drifting to earth. Let your hands open completely, fingers uncurling like fern fronds. Everything relaxes, everything releases, everything simply exists in this breath, in this moment. In this perfect, peaceful, present. We begin not with a single birth, but with two. Not with one child, but with twins. Not with ease, but with desperate struggle on a barren island, while a jealous goddess raged and an ancient serpent hunted. Breathe slow and steady as the ancient story unfolds like moonlight spreading across a dark landscape. In the early days when Zeus's reign was still new, when the king of gods was establishing his power through conquest and seduction, he turned his divine attention to a titaness named Leto. She was daughter of Coeus and Phoebe, embodiment of gentleness, motherhood, quiet grace. She was not fierce, not ambitious, not hungry for power. She was simply herself, beautiful, kind, peaceful, devoted. Zeus courted Leto with the intensity gods reserve for those they truly desire. And Leto, gentle Leto, believed his promises, trusted his passion, opened her heart to the King of Heaven. From their union she conceived not one child, but two, twins who would become among the mightiest, most beloved, most feared of all the Olympian gods. But Hera discovered the pregnancy, as she always did. The Queen of Heaven made it her sacred mission to know every affair, every betrayal, every child born of Zeus's wandering desire. And when she learned that Leto carried not one but two children in her divine womb, Hera's rage was absolute, complete, world-shaking. Hera could not punish Zeus directly. He was too powerful, too protected, too supreme. So she did what she always did. She punished the woman, the victim, the one with less power. She decreed that Leto could not give birth on any land under the sun. Nowhere on earth would shelter her. No island would accept her. No mountain would hide her. Everywhere Leto went, everywhere she sought sanctuary, everywhere she begged for a place to deliver her children, was forbidden by Hera's curse, closed by the queen's wrath, denied by fear of divine vengeance. And there was more, always more. Hera sent Python to pursue Leto, an enormous serpent, a dragon born from primordial mud, ancient and terrible and relentless. It hunted Leto across the world, following her scent, waiting for her to weaken, to stumble, to fall. Rest as we watch Leto's suffering, her desperate wandering, her search for sanctuary that seemed impossible to find. Leto wandered heavy with pregnancy, the twins pressing inside her, demanding to be born. The labor pains had already begun, waves of pressure and urgency, telling her that time was running out, that these children would not wait much longer, that she must find somewhere, anywhere, or give birth while fleeing, while pursued, while utterly alone and unprotected. She wandered for 9 months, though time becomes strange when measuring divine suffering. Every place she approached turned her away. Every potential refuge rejected her. Fear of Hera was too great. The queen's power was too absolute. The risk of harboring Zeus's pregnant mistress was simply too dangerous. The gods watched, most of them. They saw Leto suffering but did nothing, afraid to help, afraid to anger Hera, afraid to involve themselves in the queen's vengeance. Zeus himself offered little assistance. Perhaps he could not openly defy Hera. Perhaps he chose not to risk his domestic peace. Perhaps he simply did not care enough about Leto's suffering to truly fight for her. The reasons varied depending on who told the story, but the result was always the same. Leto suffered alone, wandered alone, faced her impossible situation alone. But one place, one insignificant rock in the Aegean Sea, finally took pity. The island of Delos, barely worthy of the name island, more of a floating rock, barren and windswept and desperately poor, had nothing to lose. Hera's wrath could hardly make Delos worse than it already was. It was the smallest, poorest, most forgotten piece of land in all the Greek world. And so Delos agreed. It anchored itself, stopped floating, became stable. It accepted Leto. It offered sanctuary. The only place in all the wide world that would. The only refuge she could find. The only spot where she could finally stop, rest, and give birth. Breathe deeply as the birth begins, as the twins prepare to enter the world, as everything changes. Leto's labor was not easy, was not simple, was not quick. Even this final trial was prolonged, agonizing, complicated by divine power and Hera's continuing malice. The twins were powerful, too large, too radiant to be born easily. And Hera had sent Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, Hera's own daughter, away, had ordered her not to help, not to ease the pain, not to assist the delivery. Without Eileithyia, childbirth became nearly impossible. Pain without relief, labor without progress, suffering without end. Leto labored for 9 days and 9 nights, some stories say even longer. The island of Delos shook with her pain. The seas around it churned and boiled. Storm clouds gathered overhead, though no storm broke. All of creation felt these births approaching, felt divine power straining to manifest, felt the emergence of beings who would reshape the world. On the 9th day, as Leto's strength was nearly gone, as she despaired of ever delivering these children, as death seemed preferable to more suffering, the first twin was born. Let your mind see her, fierce, perfect, ready. She emerged not as a helpless infant, but as a goddess already formed, already aware, already powerful. The moment she drew her first breath, she looked at her mother's anguished face and understood immediately what was happening, what was needed, what she must do. Without hesitation, without being taught, without any instruction or guidance, She helped. She became midwife to her own twin brother, still trapped in the womb, still struggling to be born. She coached her mother, guided the delivery, made the second birth possible. At only moments old, she was already helping, already serving, already demonstrating the fierce compassion that would define her forever. Her name was Artemis, and she was magnificent. Even as a newborn goddess, she was tall, strong, radiating power and independence. Her eyes were dark, penetrating, missing nothing. Her movements were precise, economical, perfect. She was born knowing, born ready, born to be wild and free and utterly, absolutely herself. With Artemis's help, with her coaching and guidance and fierce will, the second twin was finally born. Apollo emerged in a burst of golden light, in music that seemed to come from nowhere, in radiance that transformed barren Delos into a garden paradise. The sun grew brighter. Flowers erupted from stone. Springs bubbled up from dry ground. The transformation was immediate, miraculous, complete. But Artemis had been born first, in darkness, in struggle, in her mother's pain. Where Apollo brought light and music and easy transformation, Artemis had brought determination, assistance, the hard work of helping. Where Apollo emerged into a world made beautiful, Artemis had emerged into suffering and immediately eased it. This difference would define them forever. Apollo the sun, Artemis the moon. Apollo the civilization, Artemis the wilderness. Apollo the art, Artemis the hunt. Twins but opposites, connected but contrary, forever linked but forever different. Rest now as the twins grow, as they develop, as Artemis discovers who and what she is meant to be. Divine children grow quickly, preternaturally, impossibly fast. Within days, both twins were youths, strong and beautiful, and ready to claim their powers. But where Apollo immediately went to Delphi to slay Python and establish his oracle, Artemis made a different choice. A choice that would define everything about her, that would set the pattern for her eternal existence. She went to her father Zeus and asked for gifts. Not treasures, not jewels, not palaces or power over others. Her requests were specific, unusual, telling. "Father," she said, "I ask for eternal virginity. I will never marry. I will never belong to any man or god. I will remain forever myself, forever free, forever unbounded by the ties that limit other goddesses." Zeus was surprised but agreed. This daughter would never cause the complications that lovers and husbands created. She would never be source of jealousy or conflict over marriages and affairs. Her request was actually convenient. "Granted," he said. "I ask for a bow and arrows like Apollo's," Artemis continued, "but silver where his are gold, moonbright where his are sunbright. I will hunt, and my arrows will never miss." Zeus agreed. She would be goddess of the hunt, would master the bow, would provide game for mortals who honored her. "Granted. I ask for a knee-length tunic, suitable for running and hunting, not long robes that tangle and bind. I ask for buskins for my feet, boots for rough terrain. I ask for 60 ocean nymphs as my companions, all of them sworn to virginity like me. I ask for 20 river nymphs to care for my hunting dogs and equipment. I ask for all the mountains as my domain, and just one city, any city, for I will rarely visit cities, preferring to dwell in wild places, where women in childbirth call upon me." Zeus looked at his daughter, at this fierce young goddess who knew exactly what she wanted, who asked for freedom instead of power, for wilderness instead of civilization, for independence instead of the traditional rewards goddesses sought. He was impressed, perhaps even a bit awed. "Granted," he said, "all of it granted. You shall have everything you ask, daughter. Be what you wish to be. Go where you wish to go. Live as you choose to live." And Artemis bowed, thanked her father, and left Olympus for the wild places, for the forests and mountains, for the realm where she would reign supreme, where she would be utterly, completely, forever free. Sink into what this choice meant, what it represented, what it cost, and what it preserved. Artemis chose virginity not because she hated men, not because she feared passion, not because she was cold or unfeeling. She chose it because marriage, in the ancient world, meant losing yourself, losing your identity, losing your freedom. A wife belonged to her husband. Her property became his. Her body was his to command. Her children were his legacy. She existed to serve him, to bear his children, to maintain his household, to be extension of him rather than herself. Artemis rejected this absolutely. She would belong to no one, would serve no one's interests but her own, would answer to no one except herself, and occasionally her father Zeus. She would be autonomous, independent, self-directed, self-possessed. She would be herself, forever, without compromise, without surrender, without the dilution that marriage and motherhood would demand. This made her radical, revolutionary, dangerous. In a society where women's value came from their relationships to men, as daughters, wives, mothers, Artemis carved out a space where female value was intrinsic, was self-generated, required no male validation or participation. She was complete in herself. She needed nothing and no one to make her whole. Her companions, the 60 ocean nymphs, the 20 river nymphs, were all required to take the same vow, to remain virgin, to belong to no man, to devote themselves to the hunt and the wild and the goddess herself. Together they formed a community of women, independent, fierce, living outside patriarchal structures, creating their own society on their own terms. This was threatening, was dangerous, was the kind of female autonomy that challenged the entire social order. But Artemis was too powerful to suppress, too beloved to attack, too necessary, especially to women in childbirth, to eliminate. So she was tolerated, was honored, was feared, was given space to be herself. Breathe as we turn to Artemis in the wild, Artemis the huntress, Artemis in her element. Artemis roamed the mountains and forests with her companions, hunting with bow and arrow, running with her hounds, living free under the open sky. She wore a short tunic that ended at her knees, shockingly short by Greek standards, practical for running and hunting, liberating after the long restrictive robes that other goddesses wore. She wore boots instead of sandals, ready for rough terrain, for mountain climbing, for chasing prey through wilderness. Her bow was silver, her arrows tipped with silver, her chariot, when she used one, drawn by golden-horned deer, by sacred animals that belonged to her alone. She hunted not for sport, but for food, for her companions, and for the mortals who honored her. The hunt was sacred, was ritual, was the proper relationship between humans and the animals that sustained them. To hunt with honor, with respect, with gratitude. This was Artemis's teaching. This was her gift. Animals were sacred to her. The deer especially, but also the bear, the boar, the quail, the guinea fowl. Young animals were under her protection. No one could harm fawns or cubs or chicks without risking her wrath. She was the protector of the young and vulnerable, the guardian of new life, even though she herself would never give birth, would never mother children of her own body. This paradox was central to her nature. She helped her mother give birth to Apollo, becoming midwife at her own birth. She was goddess of childbirth, the one women called upon in labor, the one who could ease pain and ensure safe delivery. But she herself would never experience it, would never be pregnant, would never nurse an infant, would never be mother. She helped others bring forth life while refusing that role for herself. She protected the young while remaining forever the eternal maiden. She was intimately connected to the cycle of birth and motherhood while standing completely outside it. This was not contradiction, but completeness. She knew all aspects of female existence, participated in all of them except the one that would bind her, that would end her independence, that would make her less. Rest as the first part ends, as Artemis is established, as the wild goddess claims her domain. Artemis dwelt in the mountains, in the deep forests, in wild places far from cities and civilization. She bathed in sacred springs, hunted in sacred groves, ran with her virgin companions under the moon that would become her symbol, her light, her celestial counterpart to Apollo's sun. She was fierce, was untamed, was dangerous to those who offended her. But she was also protective, nurturing to those who honored her properly, gentle with the young and innocent and vulnerable. She contained multitudes, virgin and midwife, huntress and protector, destroyer and preserver, wild and sacred, free and devoted. The first part ends with Artemis choosing freedom, claiming wilderness, establishing her domain and her difference. She would never marry, never submit, never compromise her autonomy. She would be eternal maiden, eternal huntress, eternal embodiment of female independence and power. She would be Artemis, forever wild, forever free, forever herself. Breathe deep, let the story settle in your mind like moonlight settling on a forest floor. Let Artemis's fierce independence inspire your dreams. Let her wild freedom carry you deeper into rest. Float now, suspended between waking and sleeping, between civilization and wilderness, between the tame and the wild. Artemis runs through your dreams, silver bow in hand, hounds at her heels, free as wind, wild as the moon. Let her carry you deeper into the forest of sleep. Part 2. The Virgin Goddess and her vengeful protection. Deeper now, deeper still. You sink beneath the surface of consciousness into the realm where wild things dwell, where the hunt is eternal, where the moon never sets, where Artemis reigns supreme over forest and mountain and all untamed places. Breathe barely, like a deer sensing danger, like a hunter waiting for the perfect shot, like the stillness before the arrow flies, almost imperceptible, almost nothing, almost gone. Artemis's virginity was not passive, not mere absence of sexual experience, not simple purity in the conventional sense. It was active choice, fierce determination, defended absolutely against any threat, any violation, any attempt to take what she would never willingly give. She protected her own virginity and the virginity of her companions with violence that was swift, certain, terrible. The stories of men who tried to violate her or her followers were warnings, were lessons, were demonstrations of what happened when male desire threatened female autonomy. Let the stories unfold, harsh and necessary, showing what protection truly costs. Actaeon was a hunter, a mortal man, skilled and proud, and accustomed to taking what he wanted from the wild. One day, while hunting in the mountains, he wandered into a grove sacred to Artemis, a place forbidden to men, a sanctuary where the goddess and her companions bathed in a clear spring, naked and unguarded because this was their space, their safety, their place where male gaze could not reach. Some say Actaeon stumbled upon them by accident, lost in the hunt, not knowing he trespassed on sacred ground. Others say he deliberately sought them out, having heard rumors of beautiful nymphs bathing, wanting to see, wanting to possess with his eyes what he could never possess with his hands. Either way, the result was the same. Sink into the moment of violation, of invasion, of the male gaze penetrating female sanctuary. Actaeon pushed through the bushes and saw them, Artemis and her nymphs, naked in the spring, water running over divine and semi-divine flesh, beauty beyond mortal comprehension exposed, vulnerable, private. His eyes widened, he stared, he drank in the sight, he violated their privacy with his gaze, with his presence, with his existence in this space that should have been safe, should have been sacred, should have been protected. The nymphs screamed, tried to cover Artemis with their bodies, tried to shield the goddess from his eyes. But Artemis needed no protection from her companions. She was tall enough that they could not hide her, and she was powerful enough that she needed no shield. She looked at Actaeon with eyes that held no mercy, no forgiveness, no understanding. He had seen what should never be seen. He had invaded what should have been inviolate. He had brought the male gaze, the objectifying stare, the possessive desire into a space specifically created to be free of exactly that. Punishment was immediate, was absolute, was permanent. Artemis raised her hand, spoke a curse. Now try telling anyone what you saw. Go ahead, speak if you can about the naked goddess you've gazed upon. Tell your story, if you are able. Breathe as the transformation begins, as punishment manifests, as violation is repaid with destruction. Actaeon's body began to change. Antlers sprouted from his head, burst through his skull in agony. His hands became hooves, his skin became hide, his voice became the call of a stag. In moments he was no longer man but deer, prey instead of hunter, victim instead of violator. He tried to speak, to apologize, to explain, but only animal sounds emerged. He tried to run toward home, toward safety, but his new form carried him away from human habitation, back into the wild, back into the realm of hunters, back into danger. And then he heard them, his own hunting dogs, his own hounds that he had trained and fed and loved. They caught his scent, the scent of a stag, of prey, of something to be hunted. They did not recognize him, could not know that this deer was their master transformed, could not understand that this was the man who had fed them, trained them, cared for them. They pursued him, He ran, terrified, his new form swift but not swift enough, his new hooves fast but not fast enough, his new heart pounding but not strong enough. The dogs caught him, pulled him down, tore him apart. His own hounds killed him, devoured him, while he was still conscious, still aware, still knowing who he was and what was happening. His hunting companions found the scene, their friend's dogs standing over a killed stag, blood everywhere, no sign of Actaeon himself. They assumed he had run off, had missed the kill, had lost his hound's greatest achievement. They searched for him to share the good news of the hunt. They never found him. They never knew that the stag their hounds had killed was the man they sought. Artemis's punishment was complete, was perfect, was a lesson that echoed through the ages. Do not violate female sacred space. Do not bring the male gaze where it is forbidden. Do not assume you have right to see what is not offered to be seen. The price is death, transformation, destruction, by the very forces you once commanded. Rest as this harsh lesson settles into your consciousness. Uncomfortable, necessary, true. The story of Actaeon was told and retold, was painted and sculpted, was interpreted endlessly. Was he innocent or guilty? Did he stumble upon Artemis by accident or seek her deliberately? Did he deserve such harsh punishment for a mere glimpse, a momentary violation? But these questions missed the point. In a world where women's bodies were constantly vulnerable to male violence, where female sacred space was constantly invaded, where privacy was a luxury women could rarely afford, Artemis's fierce protection was necessary, was justice, was the violence required to preserve the space where violence did not reach. Artemis did not negotiate, did not warn, did not give second chances. Violation of her sanctuary meant death. This absoluteness was her power, was her protection, was what made her sacred space actually safe. Men did not accidentally wander into Artemis's groves. They knew, they were warned, they understood the cost. And if they still came, if they still looked, if they still violated, then they accepted the consequence. Transformation, death, destruction. Sink deeper as we turn to another story, another violation, another punishment. Orion was a giant, a hunter, perhaps the greatest mortal hunter who ever lived. Tall as a mountain, strong as 10 men, skilled with spear and bow and net, he could hunt anything, could track anything, could kill anything. And he boasted that he would kill every animal on earth, would hunt the world clean, would prove his supremacy over all wild things. Some say he also hunted Artemis's nymphs, pursued them with intent to rape, to violate, to take by force what would never be given willingly. Others say he simply boasted of his hunting skill, claimed he was superior even to Artemis herself. Still others say he and Artemis were friends, hunting companions, that she cared for him, and his death was accident or jealousy rather than punishment. The stories vary, but the ending is always the same. Orion died by Artemis's design, by her will, by her hand, or her proxy. Let the death unfold, ambiguous in motivation, certain in result. Some versions say Artemis sent a scorpion to kill Orion, a giant scorpion that stung him to death despite all his strength and skill. Others say Apollo tricked Artemis into killing Orion herself, challenging her to hit a distant target in the sea, not telling her that the target was Orion's head, as he swam far from shore. She shot, hit the target perfectly as she always did, and only later discovered she had killed the giant hunter. Either way, Orion died, and Artemis, feeling grief or guilt, or simply acknowledging his skill, placed him among the stars. The constellation Orion, the hunter, forever pursuing the Pleiades, forever fleeing the Scorpion, forever frozen in the heavens, hunting eternally, but never catching, fleeing eternally, but never escaping. If Orion had threatened her nymphs, then his death was justice, was protection, was necessary violence to preserve safety. If he had boasted too proudly, then his death was lesson in humility, was reminder that no mortal equals a god, was punishment for hubris. If he had been Artemis's friend, then his death was tragedy, was loss, was grief that even goddesses must bear. Perhaps all three were true. Perhaps Artemis cared for Orion, but could not allow his violations of her nymphs, could not tolerate his hubris, could not permit anyone, even a friend, to threaten the sacred boundaries she maintained. Love and justice were not opposites in Artemis's world. She could care for someone and still destroy them if they violated what must not be violated. Breathe deeply as we turn to Artemis's protection of her nymphs, her companions, her chosen family. Callisto was one of Artemis's favorite companions, beautiful and devoted and skilled in the hunt. She had sworn the oath of virginity, had committed herself to the goddess's service, had joined the community of free women who lived outside conventional society. But Zeus saw Callisto and desired her. The king of gods cared nothing for her vow, nothing for her commitment to Artemis, nothing for her own will and choice. He wanted her, so he would have her. Some stories say he raped her while disguised as Artemis herself, the ultimate violation, using the goddess's own form to assault her follower. Others say he appeared as Apollo, or as a simple mortal, or in his own divine form. The method varied, but the result was the same. Callisto was violated, her vow was broken, her body was no longer hers alone. She tried to hide it, tried to conceal what had happened, tried to continue as if nothing had changed. But during a bathing scene, Artemis and the other nymphs saw that Callisto was pregnant. Her belly was swollen, her body transformed by forced pregnancy, by violation she had not chosen and could not prevent. Rest as the betrayal unfolds, as Callisto faces the goddess she served. Artemis's reaction was not sympathy, not understanding, not compassion for the violated. Instead, it was rage at the broken vow, fury at the violation of the community's sacred bond, absolute rejection of the impurity that rape had introduced into their sacred circle. "You have broken your vow," Artemis said, cold and absolute. "You are no longer virgin, no longer one of us, no longer welcome in my presence. Leave, go. You are banished from my sight." Callisto wept, tried to explain, tried to say it was not her choice, not her will, not her fault. But Artemis did not listen, did not care, did not accept that rape could be anything but the victim's failure to prevent it. In this, Artemis was product of her culture, bound by its terrible logic that blamed women for male violence, that saw female purity as absolute, regardless of how it was violated, that could not distinguish between chosen sexual activity and forced violation. Callisto left, banished, alone, pregnant with Zeus's child. She gave birth to a son, Arcas, whom she loved despite everything. But Hera discovered the child, discovered another of Zeus's bastards, discovered another woman to punish for Zeus's crime. Hera transformed Callisto into a bear, condemned her to wander as an animal, to be hunted by the very companions she had once hunted with, to live in constant fear and danger. Years later, her son Arcas, now grown, encountered a bear in the forest and did not know it was his mother transformed. He raised his spear to kill her. Zeus intervened at the last moment, took pity on his victim, transformed both Callisto and Arcas into constellations, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Great Bear and the Little Bear, forever circling the pole star, forever together but forever transformed, forever punished for Zeus's crime, forever paying the price for male divine violence. Breathe as this injustice settles over you like cold water, as you see Artemis's complicity in victim-blaming, as you understand that even divine protectors can fail those who need protection most. This story reveals Artemis's limitations, her flaws, her inability to transcend the patriarchal culture she inhabited. She could protect her nymphs from mortal men, could punish those who violated sacred space, could create sanctuary from ordinary male violence. But she could not protect them from gods, could not punish Zeus for his rapes, could not distinguish between chosen sexual activity and forced violation when determining who deserved to remain in her sacred circle. In this, Artemis failed Callisto, failed her own principles, failed to provide the absolute safety she promised. The sanctuary she offered was real, but limited, powerful, but not omnipotent, protective, but not perfect. Against mortal men, her protection was absolute. Against divine rapists, she was helpless, and her response was to blame the victim, to banish the violated, to maintain the purity of her circle by excluding those whose purity had been forcibly taken. This harsh truth makes Artemis more complex, more real, more tied to her cultural moment. She was radical in her independence, revolutionary in her rejection of marriage, fierce in her protection of female autonomy. But she was still limited by Greek attitudes toward rape, toward purity, toward women's responsibility for male violence. She was product of her time as much as transcendence of it. Rest now as we turn to another aspect of Artemis, her role in the hunt and its sacred violence. Artemis presided over the hunt, made it sacred, taught mortals how to hunt with honor. Animals were not mere resources to be exploited, but sacred lives to be taken with respect, with gratitude, with ritual that acknowledged the gift of their deaths. Hunters prayed to Artemis before the hunt, offered her the first kill, thanked her for success. She blessed good hunters and punished bad ones, those who killed for sport rather than food, who wasted animal life, who showed no respect for their prey, who violated the sacred compact between hunter and hunted. The Caledonian boar hunt demonstrated this. Artemis sent an enormous boar to ravage Caledon because King Oeneus had failed to offer her proper sacrifice, had honored all the gods except her at his harvest festival. The boar was massive, deadly, unstoppable, killing men and destroying crops. It was divine punishment. Was Artemis's wrath made manifest? Was death sent to remind mortals that the gods demand respect, require acknowledgement, will punish neglect. Heroes from across Greece came to hunt the boar: Meleager, Theseus, Jason, Atalanta, and many others. Atalanta was herself devotee of Artemis, virgin huntress like the goddess, skilled and fierce and the equal of any man. She struck the boar first, drawing first blood, proving her skill. But Meleager's uncles insulted her, claimed that women should not hunt with men, that her presence and her success were shameful. Meleager killed his own uncles in her defense, and his mother killed him in revenge for her brothers' deaths. The hunt succeeded, but ended in tragedy, in family bloodshed, in death and grief and loss. Artemis watched it all, her punishment delivered, her point made. Do not neglect the gods. Do not fail to honor those who deserve honor. Do not forget that divine power demands respect. The boar was killed, but the cost was terrible, was permanent, was exactly what Artemis intended. Sink deeper as the second part ends, as we understand Artemis more fully. Fierce protector and harsh judge, liberator and enforcer, goddess of freedom and goddess of violent justice, containing multitudes, containing contradictions, containing the complexity of female power in a patriarchal world. The second part ends with Artemis revealed in her contradictions. She protects but also punishes. She offers sanctuary but also demands perfection. She understands female vulnerability but also blames victims when protection fails. She is not simply good or simply just. She is powerful, complex, limited and limitless, divine and all too reflective of the flawed world she inhabits. She remains the eternal virgin, the eternal huntress, the eternal embodiment of female independence. But independence does not mean perfection. Freedom does not mean flawlessness. Power does not mean absence of complicity in the very systems one resists. Artemis is who she is: wild, free, fierce, flawed, magnificent, terrible, protective, punishing, liberating, demanding, sacred, and all too real. Sleep beckons now, soft and insistent, offering respite from complexity, from contradiction, from the hard truths about protection and power. Let yourself drift. Let Artemis's moonlight guide you deeper into rest. Let the wild goddess watch over your sleeping. Float now between worlds, between the civilized and the wild, between the protected and the vulnerable, between the fierce and the gentle. Artemis runs through silver forests in your dreams, protecting what can be protected, destroying what must be destroyed, being herself forever. Part 3. The Moon, Goddess and the Cycle of Life. Deeper still, you descend into the realm where Artemis merged with the moon itself, where her silver light guides lost travelers, where her phases mark time and tide and the cycles of female bodies, where she watches from above, distant and close, cold and warm, eternal and ever-changing. Breathe like the tide responding to lunar pull, like flowers opening to moonlight, like nocturnal animals emerging at dusk, barely there, almost silent, perfectly attuned to the rhythm of night. Artemis was not originally a moon goddess. That role belonged to Selene, Titan goddess of the moon, who drove her chariot across the night sky, as Helios drove the sun across the day. But over time, Artemis and Selene merged in worship and understanding, became identified with each other, became inseparable, until Artemis herself was the moon, was lunar light, was the celestial body that governed night and tide, and female cycles. This association made perfect sense. The moon was changeable, was constantly shifting through phases, was never fully revealed or fully hidden, was mysterious and powerful and beautiful. Like Artemis herself, the moon was independent, following its own path across the sky, needing no sun to validate its existence, creating its own light through reflection, being itself, regardless of what others wanted or expected. The moon's phases corresponded to female cycles, to menstruation, to pregnancy, to the rhythms of female bodies that men could not control, could not command, could not fully understand. The moon was female power, was female mystery, was the part of women that remained wild and untamed, and forever beyond patriarchal possession. Artemis, as moon goddess, watched over night travelers, guided them with her light, protected them from the dangers of darkness. She governed the tide, pulling the oceans back and forth with invisible force. She marked time itself. Months were measured by her phases. Calendars were lunar before they were solar. Time itself was counted by Artemis's changes. Rest as we explore Artemis's role as protector of young women, guide through transitions, guardian of female life stages. Artemis was invoked at key moments in girls' and women's lives, at the transition from girlhood to womanhood, during pregnancy, at childbirth, and even at death. She guided females through all the transitions, all the dangerous passages, all the moments when life hung in balance, and protection was desperately needed. In Athens, young girls served as arctoi, little bears, in Artemis's sanctuary at Brauron. They wore saffron robes and performed sacred dances, ritually playing at being bears, reenacting the story of a bear sacred to Artemis that had been killed, and the goddess's demand for recompense. This service marked their transition from childhood to readiness for marriage, was initiation into womanhood, was sacred time dedicated to the goddess before they entered the world of marriage and motherhood that Artemis herself had rejected. The ritual acknowledged both paths, Artemis's eternal virginity and the girls' future roles as wives and mothers. It honored the goddess who chose freedom while preparing girls for the life most would live, the life of marriage and motherhood that Artemis protected but did not share. It was paradox made sacred, contradiction transformed into ritual, the acknowledgement that not all women could be like Artemis, but all could invoke her protection and blessing. Pregnant women prayed to Artemis, despite her own virginity, because she had helped birth Apollo, because she understood the dangers of childbirth, because she could ease pain and ensure safe delivery. Women in labor called her name, begged her assistance, promised offerings if she would help them survive, would help their babies live, would guide them through the most dangerous passage of female existence. Artemis's arrows could bring sudden, painless death to women, a mercy killing that spared them slow dying, lingering illness, agonizing decline. When women died quickly, peacefully, without suffering, it was said that Artemis had shot them with her gentle arrows, had granted them mercy, had taken them swiftly to spare them pain. This was gift, was kindness, was the goddess's care for female suffering. Sink into the story of Iphigenia, the girl who was almost sacrificed, who became Artemis's priestess, who embodied the goddess's protection and her demands. Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and leader of the Greek forces sailing to Troy, offended Artemis. Some say he killed a deer in her sacred grove and boasted he was a better hunter than the goddess herself. Others say he killed a deer sacred to her. Still others say he had once vowed to sacrifice the most beautiful thing born in the year of his daughter Iphigenia's birth, but had failed to fulfill the vow. Whatever the offense, Artemis's punishment was absolute. She stilled the winds at Aulis where the Greek fleet was gathered. The ships could not sail. The war against Troy could not begin. The entire Greek army sat idle, waiting, growing restless, growing hungry, growing desperate. The seer Calchas revealed the truth. Artemis demanded a sacrifice, demanded recompense, demanded Agamemnon's own daughter Iphigenia as payment for his offense. Only her blood would appease the goddess. Only her death would release the winds. Only her sacrifice would allow the ships to sail. Agamemnon faced an impossible choice: sacrifice his daughter or abandon the war, lose his honor, betray his oath to help Menelaus recover Helen, fail as a leader and a king. He chose the war, chose honor, chose to sacrifice his daughter for military success, for glory, for the demands of masculinity and power. Iphigenia was summoned to Aulis under false pretenses, told she was to marry Achilles, told she was to be celebrated, told she was honored and loved. Instead, she was brought to the altar, was bound, was prepared for sacrifice, was betrayed by her own father, who valued war more than his child. Breathe as the sacrifice approaches, as the knife is raised, as Artemis intervenes. But at the last moment, according to some versions, Artemis saved Iphigenia. The goddess substituted a deer on the altar, spirited the girl away to Tauris, made her priestess of Artemis's temple there. Iphigenia was saved, was given new life, was transformed from victim into sacred servant, from sacrificed daughter into autonomous woman serving the goddess who had rescued her. In Tauris, Iphigenia presided over sacrifices of strangers who landed on that shore. The goddess who had almost been sacrificed, now sacrificing others, the pattern repeating, the violence continuing, but transformed. Eventually her brother Orestes came to Tauris, and she helped him steal the sacred statue of Artemis and escape, was reunited with her family, was brought back to Greece, where she continued to serve Artemis as priestess. Other versions say Iphigenia was actually sacrificed, that no deer was substituted, that Agamemnon actually killed his daughter, that Artemis accepted the sacrifice and released the winds, but did not save the girl. In these versions, Iphigenia became priestess in death, served Artemis in the afterlife, was honored and mourned, but not saved, not rescued, not given second life. The ambiguity is significant. Did Artemis save Iphigenia or accept her sacrifice? Did the goddess protect the girl or demand her blood? Was Artemis savior, or was she the deity who required a child's death to appease her anger? Perhaps both. Perhaps Artemis contained both the protective and the demanding, both the merciful and the vengeful, both the savior and the one who required sacrifice. Perhaps she was not simple, not easily categorized, not reducible to only protective or only destructive. Perhaps she was complex, like all divinity, like all power, like all that is sacred and terrible and true. Rest now as we turn to Artemis and Hippolytus, the young man who devoted himself to the virgin goddess. Hippolytus was son of Theseus, king of Athens. He was devoted to Artemis, worshipped her exclusively, joined her hunts as mortal follower, remained chaste as she was chaste, rejected marriage and sexuality as she rejected it. He was Artemis's perfect devotee, was the male equivalent of her virgin nymphs, was pure and devoted, and absolutely committed to the goddess. But Aphrodite, goddess of love and sexuality, was offended by Hippolytus's rejection of her domain. He scorned love, scorned sexuality, scorned everything Aphrodite represented. He was insult to her, was denial of her power, was challenge to her supremacy. She decided to punish him, to destroy him, to prove that no one could reject her domain without consequences. Aphrodite made Hippolytus's stepmother, Phaedra, fall in love with him. Impossible, inappropriate, doomed love. Phaedra's passion was not her choice, but divine curse, was punishment that she bore for Hippolytus's offense, was Aphrodite's cruelty made manifest in helpless desire. Phaedra confessed her love to Hippolytus, begged him to accept her, to return her feelings, to give her the love that consumed her. Hippolytus was horrified, was disgusted, rejected her absolutely, was cruel in his purity, was harsh in his devotion to Artemis and chastity. Phaedra, rejected and ashamed, disappeared. But before her death, she left a note accusing Hippolytus of criminal acts against her, lying to protect her reputation, making the rejected lover into violator, turning victim into perpetrator. Theseus believed the note, cursed his son, called upon Poseidon to punish him. As Hippolytus drove his chariot along the shore, a bull emerged from the sea, terrified his horses, caused them to bolt. Hippolytus was thrown, dragged, mangled, left dying on the beach. Artemis appeared to him as he died, told him the truth, that Phaedra had lied, that Aphrodite had caused everything, that he was innocent, that his devotion to Artemis was recognized and honored. But she could not save him, could not prevent his death, could not undo what Aphrodite had done. She could only witness, could only comfort, could only promise that he would be honored, would be remembered, would be celebrated for his devotion. Hippolytus died in Artemis's presence, devotee dying under his goddess's gaze. Pure to the end, chaste to the end, faithful to the end. Artemis wept, one of the few times the fierce goddess showed sorrow openly. She promised that young unmarried girls would dedicate locks of hair to him before their weddings, that he would be honored forever, that his purity would be remembered. Breathe deeply as we contemplate what this story means, what it reveals about Artemis and devotion and the cost of purity. Hippolytus's story shows the limitations of Artemis's protection. She could not save him from Aphrodite's wrath, could not prevent the consequences of rejecting another goddess's domain, could not protect her devotee from divine politics and divine vengeance. Her power had limits, had boundaries, had edges beyond which she could not reach. It also shows the cost of total devotion to Artemis's ideals, Hippolytus's chastity, his rejection of love and sexuality, his exclusive devotion to purity and hunting, made him vulnerable, made him target for Aphrodite's rage, made him unable to navigate the complex world where multiple powers demanded acknowledgement, where balance was necessary, where rejecting one goddess to honor another created danger. Artemis honored purity, but could not protect the pure from all consequences. She valued devotion, but could not save devotees from all threats. She was powerful, but not omnipotent, protective, but not all protecting, present, but not all present. She was a goddess, not the goddess. She had domain, but not dominion over all things. She could bless, but not guarantee safety. She could honor, but not prevent death. This limitation made her real, made her worship complex, made devotion to her a choice with costs as well as benefits. To follow Artemis meant independence, but also isolation, meant protection, but also limits on that protection, meant honoring one set of values while risking offense to others. Rest as the third part ends, as we see Artemis complete. Moon goddess and huntress, protector and punisher, savior sometimes, and witness to suffering other times, powerful and limited, divine and bound by the same complex reality that constrained all the gods. The third part ends with Artemis revealed in her fullness, not simple savior or simple punisher, but complex divinity containing multitudes, offering protection that was real but not absolute, demanding purity that honored female autonomy, but also isolated and endangered devotees, being the moon itself, changeable and constant, visible and mysterious, lighting the way, but not preventing all stumbles, all falls, all suffering. She remains the eternal virgin, the eternal huntress, the eternal moon. But eternal does not mean simple, divine does not mean perfect, powerful does not mean unlimited. She is who she is, wild, free, fierce, complex, contradictory, protective, demanding, present, limited, sacred, and real. Sleep pulls strongly now, the third part ending, the fourth approaching, but consciousness fading, the boundary between story and dreams dissolving like mist in morning sun. Let yourself drift. Let Artemis's moonlight guide you deeper. Let the wild goddess watch from above as you surrender to rest. Float in lunar light, suspended between earth and sky, between waking and sleeping, between the protected and the wild. Artemis rides her chariot across the night sky of your dreams, silver light spreading over all, revealing and concealing, showing the way. Deeper into sleep. Part 4. Legacy, Worship, and the Eternal Wild. The deepest darkness, the final descent, where consciousness is barely a whisper, where you exist in the space between thought and silence, between being and not being, between Artemis's moonlight and the void beyond all light. Breathe. If this barely perceptible exchange can be called breathing, this minimal sustenance of existence, this thread connecting you to awareness, to story, to the world of the wild goddess and her eternal hunt. Artemis endured through centuries of worship, through the rise and fall of civilizations, through transformations of culture and belief, through the transition from paganism to Christianity and beyond. Her worship persisted, adapted, transformed, survived because she represented something eternal, something necessary, something that transcended any particular religion or culture, the wild itself, female autonomy itself, the part of existence that refuses to be tamed, controlled, possessed. Let the history of her worship unfold like moonlight, spreading across dark water. Artemis of Ephesus. In Ephesus, in Asia Minor, Artemis was worshipped in a form quite different from the Greek virgin huntress. The Artemis of Ephesus, called Artemis Ephesia, was depicted with multiple breasts, or possibly bull testicles, or egg-shaped objects, scholars debate, representing fertility, nourishment, abundance. She was mother goddess as well as virgin, was giver of life as well as protector of wilderness, was cosmic power encompassing all aspects of female divinity. The temple of Artemis at Ephesus was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, massive and magnificent beyond description. 4 times the size of the Parthenon, it was forest of columns, temple so vast it seemed to contain infinity, sacred space where the goddess's presence was palpable, overwhelming, absolute. Pilgrims came from across the known world to worship at Ephesus, to see the cult statue, to offer sacrifice, to seek the goddess's blessing. The city's economy centered on Artemis worship, selling votive offerings, providing housing for pilgrims, manufacturing images of the goddess. When Christianity began to spread, threatening this economic and spiritual center, riots erupted. The silversmiths of Ephesus, who made their living creating images of Artemis, started a riot against the Christian missionary Paul, chanting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," for hours, defending their goddess and their livelihood. The temple was eventually destroyed by Christians, was converted into a church, was finally abandoned, and fell into ruin. But for centuries, it had been the center of Artemis worship, the place where the goddess was most powerfully present, where her sovereignty was most absolute, where her devotees could feel her wild, divine power most intensely. Rest as we contemplate the fall of the temple, the suppression of the goddess, the victory of new religion over old. Artemis and Christianity. When Christianity conquered the Roman Empire, Artemis, like all the pagan gods, was declared a demon, a false idol, a deception of Satan. Her worship was forbidden, her temples were destroyed or converted, her devotees were persecuted, her very name became curse instead of blessing. But Artemis did not entirely disappear. Some of her functions were transferred to the Virgin Mary, who became protector of women in childbirth, guardian of virgins, the pure and powerful female divine figure that Christianity needed, but struggled to fully articulate within its patriarchal framework. Mary was virgin like Artemis, was mother unlike Artemis, was pure and powerful and protective like Artemis, but also submissive and obedient in ways Artemis never was. Mary said, "Let it be done unto me according to thy word." Acceptance, submission, surrender. Artemis would never have said such a thing, would never have submitted, would never have accepted any will but her own. Still, the need for a powerful female protector persisted, and Mary filled some of that need, took over some of Artemis's functions, became the divine figure women could pray to for protection in childbirth, for preservation of virginity, for help in all the transitions and dangers of female existence. Some saints took over other aspects of Artemis. Saint Hubert became patron of hunters. Various saints became associated with wild animals, with forests, with the protection of nature. Artemis's domains were divided, distributed, parceled out among Christian figures who could fulfill the functions without requiring worship of a pagan goddess. But the wildness, the fierce independence, the absolute refusal to submit, these aspects of Artemis could not be transferred to Christian figures. They were too radical, too threatening, too incompatible with Christian teachings about female obedience and submission. These aspects of Artemis simply disappeared. from official religion, went underground, persisted in folk traditions and fairy tales, and cultural memories, but not in formal worship. Sink into the loss, the suppression, the silencing of the wild goddess. Artemis in art and literature. The Renaissance brought Artemis back, though never as an object of worship, only as subject for art and literature and philosophical contemplation. Artists depicted her in paintings and sculptures, the virgin huntress with her bow, her deer, her crescent moon crown, eternally young and eternally free. The famous Diana of Versailles, a Roman copy of a Greek sculpture, showed Artemis in her hunting pose, reaching for an arrow from her quiver, accompanied by a deer. It became one of the most copied sculptures in history, a standard for female beauty and power, for the athletic female form, for the goddess who needed no male approval or participation. Baroque fountains across Europe featured Artemis/Diana bathing, the Actaeon story endlessly reproduced, the goddess discovered at her bath, the hunter transformed into stag, the hounds attacking. It was titillating and moralizing simultaneously, was excused to show divine nudity while also warning about the consequences of male voyeurism, was art that both exploited and condemned the male gaze. Renaissance and Baroque artists understood Artemis's appeal. She was beautiful but dangerous, desirable but forbidden, nude but protected by divine wrath, vulnerable but ultimately powerful. She represented the fantasy of powerful female sexuality that did not need or want male participation, that was complete in itself, that punished those who tried to possess it. Writers invoked Artemis as symbol of female independence, of virginity as power rather than merely purity, of the wild as necessary counterbalance to civilization. Poets addressed her in verse, playwrights made her character in dramas, novelists used her myths as foundation for new stories, exploring female autonomy and power. The Romantic movement particularly loved Artemis/Diana. They saw her as embodiment of nature itself, of the wild that industrial civilization was destroying, of the sacred feminine that Christianity had suppressed, of everything beautiful and powerful and free that modernity threatened to eliminate. Breathe as centuries of artistic interpretation wash over you like moonlight. Artemis in modern psychology and feminism. Modern interpreters found new meanings in Artemis, new relevance, new power for contemporary concerns. Carl Jung and his followers identified Artemis as an archetype, the independent woman, the woman who defines herself by her own goals and values rather than by relationships to men, the woman who chooses freedom over security, autonomy over belonging. The Artemis archetype represents women who prioritize their own development, their own goals, their own values over traditional female roles. These women might choose careers over marriage, independence over motherhood, self-actualization over self-sacrifice. They might be athletes, adventurers, activists, artists, women who pursue their own vision with Artemis's single-minded focus, who protect their autonomy as fiercely as Artemis protected hers. But the archetype also includes Artemis's shadow aspects, the tendency to punish imperfection in oneself and others, the harsh rejection of anything that threatens independence, the difficulty forming intimate relationships, the isolation that can come from fierce autonomy. Women operating primarily from the Artemis archetype might struggle with vulnerability, with dependence, with allowing others close, with the compromise that relationships require. Feminist scholars reclaimed Artemis as model of female empowerment, of resistance to patriarchal control, of female community and solidarity. Her band of virgin nymphs became prototype for women's communities, for spaces where women could be themselves without male presence or judgment, for solidarity among women choosing independence over traditional roles. But feminist scholars also criticized Artemis for her victim-blaming of Callisto, for her harshness toward women who didn't maintain perfect purity, for her complicity in patriarchal standards of female virginity and blame, for her inability to protect women from divine rape, for her limitations as savior and protector. This complex feminist engagement with Artemis, celebrating her independence while criticizing her limitations, honoring her resistance while acknowledging her complicity, reflects the complexity of female power in patriarchal systems. Artemis carved out space for female autonomy, but it was limited space, was space that required purity, was space that couldn't fully protect against male divine violence, was space that isolated as much as it liberated. Rest as these contemporary interpretations settle into your consciousness. Artemis in modern paganism and environmentalism. Modern pagans, especially those in Wiccan and goddess worship movements, have reclaimed Artemis as deity to worship, to invoke, to honor in ritual. She represents the wild feminine, the untamed aspect of female divinity, the fierce protector and the independent spirit. Modern devotees create rituals honoring Artemis, hunting or hiking under the full moon, creating altars with deer images and silver objects and lunar symbols, invoking her for protection, for strength, for assistance in maintaining boundaries and autonomy. They see her as living goddess, not mere myth or symbol, as present power that can be accessed through ritual and devotion. Environmental movements have also claimed Artemis as patron, goddess of wilderness, of wild animals, of untamed nature that must be protected from human exploitation and destruction. She represents what must be preserved, what cannot be civilized without being destroyed, what has intrinsic value beyond human use or profit. When forests are clear-cut, when species go extinct, when wilderness is paved over for development, it is Artemis's domain that is destroyed. She becomes symbol of what we lose when we eliminate the wild, when we tame everything, when we leave no space for nature to be itself outside human control. Climate activists invoke Artemis implicitly, fighting to preserve wild places, to protect endangered species, to maintain biodiversity, to ensure that some parts of Earth remain untamed, uncontrolled, wild. They are doing Artemis's work whether they name her or not, whether they believe in her literally or metaphorically, whether they worship her or simply share her values. Sink deeper as we approach the end, as we understand Artemis's eternal relevance, her continuing presence, her ongoing significance. Artemis's eternal lesson. As consciousness fades almost completely, as sleep claims you at last, what is Artemis's lesson? What truth does this wild, fierce, independent, complex goddess teach us? Perhaps it is this: that autonomy matters, that independence is worth fighting for, that no one should be forced to surrender themselves. That sacred space must be defended fiercely. That female power is real and necessary and deserving of protection and respect. Perhaps it is that protection has limits, that even goddesses cannot save everyone, that sanctuary is real but not absolute, that safety requires constant vigilance and fierce defense, that violation happens despite our best efforts to prevent it. Perhaps it is that purity is complicated, that virginity as power is not the same as virginity as purity, that independence can be both liberating and isolating, that fierce autonomy has costs as well as benefits, that choosing freedom means accepting its consequences. Perhaps it is that we need wild spaces, need untamed nature, need parts of existence that refuse civilization, that resist control, that remain forever beyond human possession and exploitation. We need Artemis's forests and mountains, need her sacred groves, need places where the wild can be wild. Perhaps it is that female community matters, that women supporting women creates power, that solidarity among those who choose independence strengthens everyone, that the band of virgin nymphs, metaphorical or literal, provides belonging that doesn't require surrender, community that preserves autonomy, sisterhood that enhances rather than diminishes individual power. Artemis shows us that the wild is sacred, that independence is possible, that female power needs no male validation or participation, that autonomy can be claimed and defended, that there are still goddesses in the forest, still divine presence in wild places, still sacred spaces where different rules apply, where patriarchal control does not reach, where freedom is not just allowed but demanded. The moon rises every night. This is certain. This is Artemis's promise. After every day of sun, night of moon. After every taming, wildness persists. After every attempt to control, something escapes, remains free, runs through the forest beyond reach, howls at the moon, refuses to submit. Let this truth carry you into final sleep, into complete rest, into the wild darkness where Artemis hunts eternal, where her hounds run forever, where her arrows never miss, where her independence is absolute, where her wildness is complete, where she is forever, herself, free, untamed. Artemis. Sleep now with the wild goddess's blessing, with her silver moonlight illuminating your dreams, with her fierce protection watching over your rest, with her promise that wild spaces still exist, that independence is possible, that freedom can be claimed and kept and defended forever. Sleep. Artemis runs through eternal forests in your deepest dreams, bow in hand, hounds at her heels, moon bright above, wild and free, and forever herself, forever refusing to be tamed, to be controlled, to be anything other than exactly what she chooses to be. Sleep. The moon will rise again tomorrow night. Artemis promises this, and Artemis keeps her promises, honors her commitments, maintains her fierce, wild independence through all ages, all changes, all transformations. The wild goddess endures, the hunt continues, the moon rises forever. Sleep. The end and the beginning, forever, like the moon's phases, like the cycle of seasons, like the eternal return of the wild, no matter how much we try to tame it. Rest well. Dream wild. Artemis watches. The moon lights your way. The forest waits. The hunt never ends. The wild remains forever, always, eternally wild, eternally free, eternally Artemis. Sleep deep, dream wild, wake free.